Appamada's programs and facilities are supported through your generosity. Your support really does make a huge difference. You'll find a link for contributions on the website at appamada.org/contribute. Thank you so much.
Now we'll broaden our gaze and our inquiry into vows. We've talked about our inner vows, which are expressed through our thoughts, words, and our actions. And we've talked about hearing the cries of the world as Avalokiteshvara embodies. We've talked about the vows we make and the vows that are made for us. That's what it's wrote about. But now we're going to take up a different set of questions around the vows. And it begins with discerning some domain of our inquiry. So I have a handout, and I'm also going to screen share this with a set of questions for us. And I'll tell you in advance what those questions are. So hold a second here. Okay. You'll be doing a little bit of writing. This is not long essay form, and it's personal, your personal view of this, not something you think of as some abstract or scholarly response. The first question will be, you can hand those out. Yeah. Thank you. So the first question we ask is, how is a Sangha different from a Buddhist study group? How is a Sangha different from a Buddhist study group? The second question is, how is a Sangha different from a meditation group? The third question is, why is a Sangha not a church? Fourth question is, why is a Sangha not a club? And then the next question is, what is spiritual community's role in the world? What is the spiritual community's role in the world? And the last one, what are some of our Appamada community level vows? So you can write right on this page, I left space. And as I said, these don't have to be lengthy essays, just a reflection or two about that. And those of you online, you can see these questions all right. And hopefully you have something you can write with. And I'm asking these questions because I'm really curious about how you think about these things. We'd love to hear some responses or each of these questions if you wanted to share anything from your writing.
Sometimes one of them may have stood out more, or called you more than others, or going through them may have called for a theme of some sort, or I'm just curious about what moved in response to these questions. Mary Beth?
Yeah, the one that when I was writing that really seemed interesting to me to think more about was the one about the difference between a Sangha and a church. And when I was thinking about the difference, it's having been raised in the church, the Catholic Church, it was a really interesting question because practicing with the Sangha feels more of a way of learning more internally about what I might believe or how I might interpret some of the teachings of the Buddha. Whereas being raised in the church, it was more, this is what you believe. This is what you're supposed to believe, and you don't really question it. So it immediately went, I saw the word church, I immediately went to Christianity. I immediately went to a place of a physical structure where people come together to judge each other about the appropriateness of the beliefs and the teachings that are happening in that particular space. Whereas the Sangha was, to me, feels more of internal work.
I want to echo what you said, Mary Beth. That one stood out to me, and I considered not being honest about it. But then I decided I would try it out. Yeah, what the heck? And I said, honestly, sometimes it does feel like a church. There's Sunday service, an altar, precepts, robes, an enlightened being, studying texts, chanting, and meeting with teachers. But for me, the difference seems to be how all of these things are held. At least here at Appamada, it might be different in other sanghas, but they seem to be held with more, kind of what Mary Beth was saying, more of an open palm rather than a clenched fist. And instead of asking us to follow blindly, I think we're more encouraged to, for us to ask ourselves what all this stuff brings up for us. So that seems to be the difference, in my opinion.
You're touching on a couple of things I just want to note. There's a sociological study that was done between 10, 15 years ago, and this is a tiny thumbnail of what it's in terms of spirituality in America, at least in the United States, that in the 50s and before, spiritual community was thought of as a place, in like the church. Not just the church as an idea, but actually built that you go to church. And then in the 60s, with sort of the cultural studies, shifted to my path, not just at church, but you had this personal path that you're following. But there's a self-centeredness to that in a way that went with the 60s and 70s. And then there's a shift that began to happen about practice. So it wasn't identified with a place necessarily, although it could happen in a place. It wasn't just my path. It was some sort of shared practice activity. And once again, this is super generalized, I know, and I'm just truncating it. But it was kind of interesting to be a cultural evolution, and these are the ways this particular study talked about it. Doesn't make it so, it's just that study described it in that way, which kind of made sense a little bit to me. Some of the social shifts in the United States, which you're speaking to, I think.
Hi. Well, I found the most interesting one, the last one. What are some of our Appamada community level vows, as I understand them? And I put first and foremost to know about and exercise the right use of power in our dealings with one another within the Sangha and externally as we interact with those outside our Sangha. I found when I attended Peg's study of that over in Georgetown with a group of people who were not, part of our Sangha, but that she taught that class, it was very profound. And of course, it's because of my, I'm a recovering Catholic, and because from the earliest age, I discovered little girls were not going to ever be allowed to be acolytes or step on the altar. I realized that there was a power structure that meant that I wasn't welcome. And then, of course, the years of abuse. So I that's not in my writing, but the precepts, paramitras, and the writing of our teachers and ancestors guide us as we study and practice together. We believe matters of life and death are important. By following the forms, we share a common approach to creating an atmosphere of spaciousness in our physical space and in our bodies. So that's what I felt about that one.
I love that.
Thank you.
I began by just trying to figure out commonalities. How is a Sangha like a club? How's a Sangha? And actually, in about the meditation group, I was saying, well, the first use of Sangha was the people who came together to listen to Buddha teaching, and to meditate together, right? And then do other practices like being mendicants together and so on. But just threaded through all this is this the sense that emerged from me, or the pattern that emerged from me, at least at Appamada, that it's about mutuality, and that it's about supporting each other on the path, and like just not losing sight of that for our individuality. You know, and that there's something that you've talked about a lot, which is that there's a turn. People show up for a reason, usually because they've got some pain or something that they're struggling with, and then, you know, look around and say, well, I could help out, and that is an important turn, you know. And
The turn from something to get to something to offer.
exactly, thank you. And that members of a Sangha explicitly see each other as companions on a path, and as people to whom they have a responsibility for wholehearted engagement. That's what occurs to me.
Yeah.
I also have a question that I was surprised was not on your list, which I know you've talked about in the past, but I wondered if you have handled this in a different way in your writing. But why or how is a Sangha not like a therapy group?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Equally
Excellent.
good. Yeah. Equally good question.
Similar to what Joel was just saying, I feel like one of the best things that ever stuck with me about what a Sangha is came from you, Flint, when you said that we're sitting next to each other because we're on the edge of the Grand Canyon and we have to hold hands. And that there's like that urgency of, I think it was the Grand Canyon, but we were on the edge.
If you're gonna look over the edge, you wanna make sure you're holding on to somebody.
Yes.
Because it's terrifying to make that kind of,
Yes.
look at that mystery.
And so it's that visceral of sitting there knowing that I've got Darcy and Jessica right there. And it's that simple, it's just having,
And they're holding you up.
yes, quietly, not touching, but that feels like unique to Sangha. That's not something I experience anywhere else. That silent but profound support.
I was really drawn to many of these questions, but one was what is the spiritual community's role in the world? And the first thing I wrote was that it is to provide a container for the individual's experience or exploration of divine mystery. And I think that is the kind of looking over the edge. And I'm just interested in what you said, Flint, about my path and that kind of, and I always sort of hear this when I hear people say, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious, or I don't believe in organized religion or something. And to me, it just sort of misses the point of a community and some kind of formal container for that exploration, because I think it's really vital to keep us from going off the rails or going crazy or getting
lost in the weeds.
Getting lost, yeah.
Just kind of mucking about.
Yeah.
With
That
a lot
or
of different
just-
things that seem like, oh, that would be good and helpful.
Yeah,
And they kind of might be, but there's no coherent
right,
thing. And what the Taoist starts to do is like laser it and focus it.
right.
Not narrow it, but focus it.
And I was glad to hear Jessica say that, because I took the question about how's it not a church literally and thought about how it wasn't a church, but I like the idea that it is kind of, or that there are similarities, and that actually I think is more the way I feel, because it is a kind of, it's like people facing the world together or the mystery together, and I think in a good sense, churches are, church communities are like that as well. They can be awful.
For those of us, I'll just say from my perspective, who had powerful and profound experiences in churches, but also a lot of stuff, that makes them, if I say, do you wanna go to church? You wanna go to church with me? See, look what you did. Like this. But if I said, let's go be together and engage some, even some discipline that can help us understand this great mystery of being alive. Now your face softened. But actually it can be the same thing. I'm using different words. Can we together engage in something that it's religious, whether you like it or not, based on that, it may not be, maybe Dharma will have a lot of dogma, yes, or, belief or authority, but it's religious in that sense, the disciplined devotion, let's say, a devotion to something beyond oneself, and that's a shared activity. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That's what I'm thinking, I'm talking to myself.
And I experience it as coming together before this, everybody's sort of equal in a way, so wherever we are, whatever you believe or whatever, it's still, it's a coming forward to engage or to.
So we have,
You're good.
Yes, I can just really resonate with so much that's been shared tonight. In answering these questions, I heard a little bit of Jessica and Joel and others in the way I was trending. And basically, for me, Sangha, and Flint just now said it, it's kind of the activity of joining to me. I wrote that it's a safe and some supportive environment for waking up and growing up. And yet it has a very active component. This environment is really, this waking up happens through relationships. And, that's what Sangha is to me. It's like the way we share our journeys, the way we confess to one another our vulnerabilities, the way we, come together in sharing our lives. And I think that's what Sangha means to me. The component that makes it Sangha is the safe and supportive part. And I can find it in other places. I actually do find it in maybe a club or a meditation group or a church. But, all those things are contained within Sangha to me. They don't define Sangha. I was just loving the fact that it's a living thing. And I think Jessica mentioned that. So that's what I wanted to share.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time just sort of saying what I thought Sangha was, because it was kind of hard to think of how to frame the other ones unless I did that. A lot of you know that the very first time I sat in the Zendo, I fell in love with Sangha. I didn't quite know that that's what had happened for me, but I did. And then I got scared because it was a big love. And so then I realized, no, across time I came to know, no, this is an enduring love. So anyway, what I wrote is Sangha is a living, loving, caring, supportive refuge. Sangha is held by Dharma and Buddha and is the refuge most tangible. We come together with common precepts and vows to walk mindfully together through our daily lives, through our activities, and we bring the benefit of our practice into the world, in our families, communities. I can't read that part. Each Sangha is part of the weaving of the role of liberation and the universal Sangha. That's what I wrote.
Thank you.
So I misheard the task. Means I wrote on all of them, but PowerPoints. But the one that it was like a lightning bolt when I finally got to it, is what are some of our community level vows as you understand them? And immediately a new koan opened up for me, and that koan is Appamada. Appamada. It just kept reverberating in my body. That one word that we hold, that we speak so often, that we live, and that is mindful, active care. And as I looked at each of those, it's like the threads in a fabric or in a quilt or whatever. It's like it's these three boundless containers intermingled with each other. And so the word that came up for me was, oh my gosh, this thing we call Appamada is a shapeshifter, because it just depends on so many things. I could sit here and give you a list of what that is, but quite frankly, I think that word for me has now become, Appamada has now become a lifelong koan. Because what does that look like? What does that mean? How do we embody our vowing? What does the vowing part of mindfulness look like in its active role? What does the active part look like? So that's all I have. More questions now than any answers for anybody.
I think we are probably at the end of our time here. And so I encourage you to send these to me if you are willing to. First of all, I'd love to see them. And second of all, you might have a future in the book, so and I just would love to hear it. Also, as we're constructing this narrative story of Appamada together, it's important to hear their voices in it.
And as we sign off from this part tonight also, when we take a refuge in the triple treasure of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, in that old way from Northern India, what did Sangha mean? What did it refer to? It referred to the people who followed the Buddha. There's those people who followed the Buddha way, that's all it was. It's like, that's the Sangha. So we think about all these organizational things and philosophical things and qualitative relational things, all which are part of it. But just remember the foundational things, like, oh, if you're following the Buddha way, that's those people who get together to do that, that's the Sangha.
But the Buddha expected them to do that in spiritual friendship.
Yeah.
Not just in slavishly following the Buddha, but in their spiritual friendship.
Yeah. So what you're doing is unfolding all that and how it lives here. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.